Yovanovitch on Capitol Hill today for hours. She claimed in those hours she was recalled from her post by President Trump because of unfounded allegations of her partisanship. In her opening statement, Yovanovitch said she understood she served at the pleasure of the president, but as she put it, was incredulous as to why she was removed. Yovanovitch, an Obama holdover, which might be a clue why she would be relieved under any normal situation, reportedly had displayed an outright anti-Trump attitude on a number of occasions while ambassador. Yovanovitch was replaced by former Ukrainian ambassador William Taylor to head the U.S. Embassy in Kiev. Well, joining us tonight, award-winning investigative journalist and Fox Business contributor, I am proud to say. John, great to have you with us. John Sullivan.
Thank you, Lou. Good to be here.
First, let's start with Marie Yovanovitch, who is, as she says, she accedes to the power of the president to determine who will represent this nation under his leadership. But she is, she is carrying on as if she had been deeply wronged.
Yeah, we just spent a whole day having a hearing trying to suggest that there might not have been a cause to remove an ambassador who the president needed no cause to remove. Right. If the president has, under the Constitution, irrefutable power to remove any civil servant and replace him with who he thinks will better serve. But if you needed a reason, here's a lot of things. I did a lot of research on Marie Yovanovitch, about 8 months of work before I ever wrote about her. Let's put some things out there that people don't know. In May of 2018, the chairman of the House Rules Committee, pretty powerful guy in Congress, wrote a letter to Mike Pompeo saying he had just gotten back from Ukraine and had heard that the ambassador had made inappropriate comments, negative comments about the president and the administration, and he asked her to recall that ambassador. In November, Ukrainian authorities complained and hired an American lawyer to reach out to the Justice Department, saying that the ambassador and her embassy staff were interfering in their investigations. In February, I interviewed the Attorney General of Ukraine, who said that the ambassador had given him a list of names that she did not want to see prosecuted, interfering in the individual prosecution.
Amazing.
Now, before I ever wrote that story, I went to the State Department. You know what the State Department did? They confirmed that they actually gave them a set of names, and the State Department gave me a letter saying, yep, we actually wrote this letter saying don't pursue this George Soros group. So that story's true. But here's one that doesn't get reported a lot, but several career diplomats, former and current, called me in March and said, we just saw Yovanovitch do something extraordinary. It was in the middle of the Ukraine election, and she gave a speech and called for the removal of a prosecutor. The Foreign Affairs Manual makes two clear things. Don't meddle in the internal affairs of your host country, and by sure, don't make statements during an election that could be viewed as political. She gave this speech. It's out and open. People should go look at it and then compare it to what the Foreign Affairs Manual said. If the president needed a reason, he had plenty, but he didn't need any reasons at all. It was his power to remove her for any reason he chose.
And the role of George Soros here. His name keeps coming up in this, in your reporting and the reporting of others. It is peculiar to me. What is his role, or the role of his money, in Ukraine right now?
Well, here's a really interesting thing that people don't focus on, but he had a group called ANTAC, the Anti-Corruption Action Center of Ukraine. It's a anti-corruption group there. Right. He funds it. Guess who the other funder of it is? The State Department. The State Department is funding one of George Soros's groups. It was that group that Ukraine authorities were investigating for the possible misuse of public funds, that the State Department intervened. Ambassador Yovanovitch's office intervened, the embassy in Kiev, and they wrote a letter saying, please do not prosecute these people, back off, we don't believe your investigation is warranted. You look at that and you go, in the middle of an election, George Soros, liberal donor, what's our State Department have an interest in that? But let's go even further. Let's look at what happened. A few months later, George Soros's team got a private briefing at the State Department with Marie Yovanovitch's boss, the ambassador for Eurasian Affairs, Victoria Nuland, and they're talking about a private presentation on Russia bond market issues. What sort of donor gets that level of access that they can meet with the State Department to give their spin on something that affects their business? I think people should look more closely at the public documents, and they'll see a trail between George Soros, the Kiev embassy, and the State Department officials that supervised Marie Yovanovitch. It's sitting out in public.
And let me ask you this development. I'm impressed with how swift justice can be be implemented when it is apparently a Republican in the focus of the Justice Department. These two Russians who are accused of meddling and improperly violating federal election laws with money for U.S. candidates and their relationship to Rudy Giuliani. This is so peculiar that immediately, it seems, they are indicted by the Southern District. They're stopped. They've got $1 million bonds on them by the judge. It's quite a different story than in every other instance that I can think of recently in the last, say, 3 years by the Justice Department.
Listen, the Attorney General Barr signed off on this one. I think it's a legitimate case from what I know. Many reporters, myself included, knew of these men. They were well known to reporters who covered Ukraine issues. But let's look at something that happened a couple months ago. Just a few months ago, the Justice Department indicted a famous reggae singer who was a major donor to Barack Obama and was a frequent guest at the Obama White House for doing the same thing, taking foreign money and laundering it into the election. I think it's a priority of the Justice Department to do this. I think the timing of the case just looks to be a coincidence. I don't think it's tied to anything related to impeachment. I think the Attorney General signed off on it. Let's see where the facts are, and let's see if these men are guilty or innocent. That's what a jury's for.
It's what a jury's for, and John Solomon always reminding us